Stadium, Patriots, Bills. Wow.
That was a snoozer, wasn't it?
Wow.
My
I
eyes were
commend
kind of
anyone who's
dozing
here.
off that a little bit.
I'm not saying you shouldn't be watching a Patriots post-game show right now, but I wouldn't blame you if you're not. This was over extremely early, a really tough game to watch. Almost, if you were writing one of those, 3 up, 3 down sort of columns right now, what would you do?
Run game up, everything else down. I suppose
run game up for like a quarter
for the
until
first
they abandoned it.
Right. And the score and all that kind of stuff, you have to, if you're down 3 touchdowns, you're not going to keep running the ball into a brick wall. I mean, obviously you're going to try to throw the football, but I just think that tonight was, sort of a microcosm of all the issues that they have on both sides of the football, the roster deficiencies, the quarterbacking problems, the receiver problems. But I think the main thing when you look at the quarterback, and I know some people think we harp too much on the quarterback, some people think we don't give enough blame to the quarterback. I think the main thing that you really look at with the quarterback position in Cam Newton is that there's just a lack of improvement week to week, right? He's not getting any better within the structure of the offense. It's not necessarily going through every single throw and nitpicking ball placement and was it accurate, was it not accurate, was it a drop, was the receiver in the right spot? No, it's just the big picture things about playing the quarterback position, knowing when a blitz is coming and knowing where your answer is to that blitz off of that, setting your feet and making a throw there before the half to N'Keal Harry instead of throwing off of 1 foot and sort of jump passing it down the field. Things like that I think
even the touchdown, Evan, was a result of not feeling pressure. That easily could have been a sack.
Yeah, and I think that those are the sort of things that more so than nitpicking every single throw and studying ball placement and trying to tag it as an accurate throw or an inaccurate throw, it's the big picture things that are really more of a struggle in terms of, like you said, awareness, pocket awareness of pressure, awareness of blitzes. That second, third down that Cam Newton took a 13-yard sack on, he has the answer against the blitz on Damiere Byrd on a shallow crosser. That's his hot, right? When the blitz comes, he sees the blitz. That's where his eyes are supposed to go immediately. Instead, he's staring down the left side of the field, trying to let those deeper passing concepts past the sticks develop, and the blitz is coming right at him, and he doesn't really react to it. And I think that's, just one thing that you keep on seeing with him every single week is that lack of reaction to pressure, that lack of feel for where his answers are. It's just a whole lot of the same mistakes over and over again.
And that's what's infuriating is I'm tired of listening to you say that.
Yeah.
And it's not because you're wrong. It's because you've said it every week, because that's been the case every week. When you talk about no improvement, you're talking he's either been flat or shown regression over some weeks, week to week, in all of those things that you mentioned. And I think this is where people are losing their minds here is I don't believe, and put me in this category, I do not want to see Jarrett Stidham play because I think Jarrett Stidham is better than Cam Newton. I just can't watch this anymore.
Right.
It's what, from a development standpoint, what this is, what you've got. Okay, so you're not learning anything, and really just from an aesthetic standpoint, it's ugly. It's hard to watch, and you've seen it over and over again. So you're almost getting frustrated watching that lack of improvement, the lack of progression, and in fact, in many ways, the longer it goes on, the more you see that how many flaws there are in his game, and it just hammers home the point that it's obviously. And again, I think you grudgingly came to this conclusion maybe last week, or even though you've been trending there most of the way, but you've been giving him as fair a shot as anybody out there, which is there's some good in there too, and it's not all on him. And you finally came to the conclusion, I believe last week, that they know they can't go forth with Cam.
No.
So I don't, for the life of me, understand the logic in playing him in tonight's game. Because again, it's not just, you're never going to learn a thing about Stidham, putting him in relief, down a bunch of points. If you want to learn anything at all, you have to give him a week's worth of reps and let him run the offense in a game that starts 0-0.
Yeah, and honestly, I tweeted out, some people agree with me, some people don't. I kind of thought Stidham was worse in this game in a lot of ways than Cam.
Sure, but again,
one of the biggest
look what
things
he's up against.
Right, and that's the biggest thing though, is that he is coming into these games cold, down 4 touchdowns already, and what can you really expect out of it? Any player in that position. But I think the biggest thing that you see with Stidham is a lot of the same issues that you see with Cam. I mean, he dirted a bunch of throws out there too, and skip passes and stuff like that, bounce passes, throwing into defenders' leverage instead of away from the leverage. That second throw that he had after the long Myers completion, where the middle of the field just opened up like the parting the Red Sea for him. That was an easy pass that any high school quarterback could have made. And he comes back on the next throw and he throws right into the defender's leverage and almost throws an interception. It just, reading out leverage is making leverage-based throws is just such a simple part of quarterbacking that any NFL starting quarterback should be able to see. Okay, the defender there has got inside leverage on this throw. I can't throw an in-breaking route against an inside leverage corner because I'm throwing into the defender's body and into his area to kind of intercept the pass. But I think mainly what you see with both of these quarterbacks is neither one of them are really the answer. But secondly, in terms of kind of just evaluating this team, if you're going to put any quarterback in there, we can talk about all of this. We can talk about Trey Lance. We can talk about Zach Wilson. We can talk about Justin Fields. We can talk about Mac Jones and Kyle Trask and go right down to Stafford and all the NFL quarterbacks. If they don't improve the roster around the QB at the wide receiver and tight end position, I don't care who you put back there. It's not going to matter all that much.
No doubt. But last week, near the end of our postgame show, we talked quite a bit about what they should do in the draft. And I was saying I would just load up on weapons, address it again and again and again and again, both in free agency and multiple times in the draft. If Pitts is there when it's your turn to draft, take him. Right. Then go receiver. Then sign a free agent receiver. And you were saying, well, you need the quarterback. So we're in a real chicken and egg sort of spiral here with the situation. They need both. They have to address both simultaneously. The problem is I think you can get weapons and stockpile because they're available, but they're always available in the draft, and there's a ton available in free agency. But you pick wrong at the quarterback position, you might be stuck into a long-term contract, or you draft the wrong guy desperately. You take a Haskins type person who you're not in love with, but it's the best available when you're picking, and you got to develop them for a few years, and that can set you back a couple of years, which is why for me, I have to think they got to go for weapons first because you can get them. And then maybe it's another stopgap year with a quarterback. Maybe you're waiting for a year or two until the guy arrives. But the last thing you want to do is rush into a situation where you trade for somebody or give a long-term contract to a person who is a slight upgrade who's still not going to get you where you need to go.
And that's sort of been my kind of this take on this entire situation is, we can go and we can turn on Sunday's action. And I watched football on Thursday, Friday, and Sunday this week before this Patriot game on Monday night. And I just was sitting there thinking to myself, man, the passing game play overall, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, all of it, even pass protection in a lot of ways is just so much worse here in New England versus anything that we see in the rest of the NFL. I mean, really almost any team. Like, you can go and turn on the Jets last week and Sam Darnold and those receivers are making plays. They're better off than what the Patriots are at right now. And that's the Jets, who a lot of people thought were going to be the worst team in the league. It just right on down the line of whether it's such a chicken or the egg thing, because sometimes it's a weapon, sometimes it's Cam. They scheme up that double pass early on in the game. They run the 2 crack toss plays. They get the entire Bills defense to bite on the double pass, and Damiere Byrd just drops a wide open touchdown. Right? I mean, that's not on Cam. The ball was right there. That's a great pass, or a good pass. I wouldn't call it a great pass, given the situation. But
it floated a tad, but still, right.
It's a very catchable ball. Right? That should have been there. Yeah, and he drops it. I mean, what are you going to do about that? And then Bill Belichick was asked at halftime, what can you do better with your passing offense? And he said, catch the ball. So it felt like Bill kind of put a lot of the first half struggles on the receivers not catching the ball instead of on Cam. But it's timing, it's execution, it's just overall just kind of feel in the offense and feel for the game that Cam Newton and his pass catchers, all of them alike, have not been able to grasp all season long, and it's just been such a grind. I mean, they can't even execute slant flat. That's like day one install of middle school football. You know, we're not talking about just NFL football. You run one guy in the flat, you run one guy on the slant. The quarterback reads the underneath defender. If he goes to the flat, he throws the slant. If he goes to the slant, he throws the flat. It's literally the simplest play in football from a passing game standpoint, and they have issues executing that. I mean, that's all you really need to know about this Patriots offense right now.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's just all sorts of bad. I don't even know where to. It's really hard to evaluate anything else throughout the game. Like, I mean, we could sit here and say, "Oh, N'Keal Harry, where was he again?" But again, one time he got open, another time Cam bounced the ball to him. So I don't know what you do there. You're not going to put it on him. I would say that Devin Asiasi maybe should have stayed on IR. This was a really rough game for him in a lot of different ways.
Pretty sure he's been targeted 5 times in the passing game, has 4 drops or something like that.
Yeah, and again,
it's
one of the throws here was a little bit late, and somebody was a safety or linebacker was coming over, anticipating it. That wasn't great, but you're right. That and missing a block on a sack as well. Just doesn't look right out there. And again, he needs to get to year 2 as fast as anybody. But really, there's not much you can evaluate off of this game. You're just kind of stuck in this, and nothing's going to be cured if next week Stidham starts and you see a little bit out of something. This just needs a whole lot of fixing.
And that's the other thing too, is that they've gotten such poor play by the entire team, including the quarterbacks, but just particularly with the quarterbacks, you don't even know what you have in a lot of these rookie tight ends or N'Keal Harry really, or any of these guys, because there's just no continuity, there's no chemistry, there's no rhythm to their passing game, there's no sharpness at all to it. So I don't think Devin Asiasi is necessarily going to be some star tight end, but how do we even really know? I don't even know how you can properly evaluate some of these younger players right now, because this is just such a mess. And I think that is as much of a detriment to Cam or Stidham or anybody as anything, is that, hey, next year you can bring in somebody like an Alex Smith or a Ryan Fitzpatrick, who probably are still only going to get you to about 7 or 8 wins anyways, but at least there's going to be some sort of professionalism to this passing game where you might actually learn a thing or two about the weapons around the quarterback.
Right. And you can't now. You can't have Cam with his bad timing, not putting people in a position to succeed, or not hitting them when they do come open and give them an opportunity to make a play. Can't have Stidham coming in cold down 25 points and expect anything to happen here. It's just it's such a debacle at this point. It's just a place no Patriots fan has been for 25, 30. I mean, pre-Drew, it's a really long time to be in the situation where you have no idea what's going on at the quarterback position. It's almost, again, it feels like a broken record. It's during the Brady era, you always knew, hey, don't take this for granted, okay? The rest of the world operates in this really weird gray area where they don't know. They're always looking for that next quarterback, and they get one, and it's not that guy, and they have to live through mediocrity for a few years until they get another guy and find out that person's not the guy. And right now, you're at the very beginning of that phase, and it is very weird because it's not – you don't just decide you need a quarterback and then get a quarterback. It could be years and years and years, or a generation before you get a guy. Forget a Tom Brady replacement, before you get a guy that you're like, oh, that's our guy, And so that's what's so scary right now, I think, for people, is even when you finally accept that you need it. And again, a lot of people hit that realization last year and were shocked that they didn't make a move for a quarterback. Everyone drank the Kool-Aid, was convinced that Stidham was the guy based on whatever intel was coming out of Foxborough. I don't know why. And then some desperation signing with Cam Newton that nobody wanted to sign obviously showed how what rough shape they were in with this position. So again, you're right. You have to do something, even if only to improve a little.
I think that you're right. And the troubling thing, I think, is that to me, a lot of people talk about the coaching and the play calling and this, that, and the other thing, and they look out coached every week and all that type of stuff. But I just really feel like the personnel they're so short in personnel right now that I'm not really sure what you want the coaches to do schematically to change what they're doing out there, right? The run game is really nice by the Patriots right now. They run a bunch of different styles of runs, different types of runs, shotgun, under center, fullback in the backfield, option runs with Cam Newton. They do a bunch of different things in the ground game. Their passing game, they can't execute, like I said, middle school, high school level stuff. They can't execute it. So I don't know what more, kind of spicing up and things like that you really expect them to be able to do when they can't do the basic day one install type of stuff. Defensively, there's a lot of issues on that side of the ball too that I don't want to ignore.
Getting worse and worse.
Yeah, and I think that the main thing that you have to look at, though, is that these coaches and the scheming and all that kind of stuff, that's not the issue here. The issue here starts at the top with Bill Belichick and Nick Caserio and player and talent evaluation and getting guys in here to play. That's why they are struggling so much on all three phases today. Really, all three phases had issues. That's not really on the fact that they, the coaching in game is the game plans and the schemes and what they're drawing up on the whiteboard. It's not that, that's we're getting into the weeds when we start to blame that kind of stuff. When you have a team that's staring right at you, big picture wise, saying they do not have the talent that other teams have across the board in a lot of different spots. So mainly I want to move over to the defense side of the ball too, though, because I think we're talking a ton, and rightfully so, about the quarterbacks and the offensive side of the ball. But defensively, I think what you're seeing, first of all, is you got to give Stephon Gilmore some credit, right? I mean, he's clearly a different type of level of player from J.C. Jackson. I like J.C. Jackson. I wrote about him this weekend. He's had amazing coverage stats since he entered the league. One of the best coverage corners in the league, according to just the metrics, right? Passer rating into his coverage, interceptions, that type of stuff. But the second that they have put him in the last couple of times that they've had to put him in that number one spot with Gilmore injured, he's not played well. Stephon Diggs has really outplayed him in 2 games this year. Rashad Perryman outplayed him against the Jets. It was really just that Ravens game, and the Ravens don't have any receivers that really scare you at all. That was the only game where he really held his own as the number one guy. So they're in a point there, I think, with Gilmore and J.C. Jackson, that you really have a big drop-off in your secondary hierarchy when Gilmore is not in there. And if you're talking about trading Gilmore or moving on from Gilmore because of his contract situation, that's a big problem too, right? I mean, that's going to be a big problem. Their pass rush basically only gets home when they scheme it up, which means that they have to rush 4 or 5 to run a game or a stunt up front or blitz the quarterback or something like that to get pressure, which obviously exposes you in the back end in different ways. The play that J.C. Jackson gave up the long touchdown to Diggs, that was just a play action pass. They sucked the linebackers up. They only had 3 guys deep. The deep safety had to take the post route over the top, and there's just nobody else there. And JC just, tries to undercut it and instead of trying to just recover and make the tackle, he tries to undercut it and go for the interception. And Josh Allen threads the needle, and it's a 50-yard touchdown. Stephon Gilmore doesn't make a play like that. He doesn't try to take that chance. He goes out there and he just makes the tackle and lives to play another down.
And there's no question. I think I saw I think the stat was it's 4 games without Gilmore. Jackson's given up 4 touchdown passes. Gilmore's given up 4 touchdown passes in his last 37 or 38 games or something along those lines. So again, that's the level and the difference there when you're talking about bumping up and chasing around that number one receiver. And it started so well, not just that push and shove down the sideline where they were chirping. He was all over him, but just on that underneath route there where he tried to get inside leverage, and it looked like he hesitated. That was a weird one. I mean, he just got beat a couple times. There's nothing to it other than that.
And Diggs is one of the best receivers in football, and is probably the hottest receiver in football right now. And Allen's probably the hottest quarterback in the NFL right now. But I think what you saw was just the hierarchy of that secondary really takes a massive hit when Gilmore isn't in there. And then second, they still cannot cover the middle of the field. They can't cover the middle of the field. There's no help to the middle of the field. You have the big long touchdown I just broke down from J.C. Jackson against Diggs. there's no help to the inside. He's got outside leverage. He's funneling the receiver inside. There's nobody underneath it. There's nobody cutting the crossing route. There's nobody there, and it's just easy pickings for Allen and Diggs. And then once J.C. Jackson undercuts it and he doesn't get there, then there's just nobody behind him to make that tackle, right? So it just time and time again, you see that. You see the corners taking risks when they don't need to take the risks. You see there's no help towards the middle of the field. That is just a breakdown in how the system is supposed to be run. And the system is not broken. Like, the Patriots system is not broken. It's still sound. It still can get the job done, but you need the players in those positions to be able to execute it.
You do, but it's hard to know this, but this just doesn't happen. Okay, you've got a 27 and a 29 point home loss in the books for the Patriots this season. I don't know if personnel is an obvious issue, but at some point you also come down to compete level, and I don't know. I don't know if it's. I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know. It's so shocking to see a Patriots team outclassed in a way you wouldn't have thought imaginable a few months ago, and to have it happen multiple times this year in games where they've been non-competitive, and then this game just to be not competitive at all, despite personnel, is a really surprising thing. And you saw, everyone saw Bill Belichick and tweeted the hell out of him slamming the phone. And that was obviously, what the hell did you have me challenge that for, sort of situation. But He's frustrated as hell. He's embarrassed. And I don't know.
I thought later in the game was more telling, and I don't know if they caught this.
Pacing.
Yeah, he was alone on the sideline, away from the entire team for a good 5 minutes, just pacing up and down the sideline. And obviously, nobody is going to go near him when he's in that kind of zone, right? You don't want to rock the boat, but it just sort of looked like a guy that just has tried to throw every single thing that he has worked on in his 30 years as a head coach in this league or whatever, and none of it is working. He's tried man, he's tried zone, he's tried blitzing, he's tried dropping it into coverage. He's tried literally everything in his playbook, everything in his arsenal, and the players just haven't been able to find something that they can hang their hat on and execute, whether it's offensively with the passing game or defensively, really in any way. All season long, they just have nothing that they can grasp into. And the secondary was supposed to be that, and it just kind of hasn't, gotten there yet.
And that's why I ask is, again, I don't know whether it's just bless their hearts, they're just not that good at football situation,
right?
Or I can't or again, everyone remembers that famous clip in that 2009 Saints beatdown in Foxborough when Bill's talking to Brady in the open mic, and it's I just don't know how to reach these guys. I don't know what to I don't know what to do with these guys. I don't know if he's back in that place where there's nothing I can do with this team, whether it's just based off of the personnel, which again is personnel that largely he has provided. And obviously you had the massive COVID exodus and you're dealing with injuries as well. But this is Bill's team. He built it and it is broken.
Yeah, and he built it. I mean, this obviously wasn't the team he built. Like, let's be fair.
No, it's not.
Opt-outs happened, and things happened that transpired to lead us to this level of mediocrity. If Dante Hightower is in this defense, then I think it's a lot different than what we're talking about here. But at the same time, I think that what you see from Bill Belichick's team is that for years, especially on the defensive side of the ball, he's been able to plug in the Terez Halls and plug in the John Simons and those types of players that other teams might look at it as, fourth or fifth guys on the depth chart, but instead, they're guys that are, in starting roles on this team. And that's not what they were supposed to be penciled in at the beginning, right? John Simon's supposed to be a role player. Terez Hall is supposed to be a depth guy. These guys are playing way too much. Exactly. And I think that that's a little bit of it too. But at the same time, I just want to, harp on the fact that if you want to get on the coaching staff and leave Josh McDaniels and Steve Belichick and those guys out of this. Like that's not the issue. You're missing, the forest through the trees here, right? The forest is that Bill Belichick has put together a team that is too deficient personnel wise and talent wise in too many areas for even him to overcome it from a scheme and coaching and technique standpoint. There's just too many holes on this particular team, especially after the wear and tear of the season and the injuries that they've had and all that kind of stuff and the opt-outs. There's just too many holes. I don't care what kind of defense you run. I don't care what kind of passing game you call. It's not going to work with the players that they have out there right now.
You had no Bentley tonight. You had no Guy. Okay. Right. No Guy.
Yep.
And now you're down. Devin McCourty left the game.
Yeah.
And obviously Gilmore's out already. Now you're looking at being David Andrews, who was dealing with a calf injury, also left the game. Shaq Mason left the game. You're looking at a really depleted team heading into Week 17. So
they're probably the Jets are playing much better football,
and the Jets are playing great. So again, for the tankers out there, so Patriots have now moved into the 13 slot, okay, from where they are right now. If they were to lose and go to 6-10, it's possible they could get passed by a couple other teams and end up, I think, as low as 10.
Right.
I think maybe
they can't even. I think they can even get to 9.
I think they can get to 9.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean that's the best case scenario at this point, right? Is just to finish with a 9th or 10th pick, something like that, would at least put them in position to maybe draft one of the big 4 quarterbacks if that's what they so choose.
Are you assuming all 4? Again, we've talked about this before. Are you assuming with what would Mac Jones be the 4th?
So I'm not assuming anything. I think the biggest question marks going into the draft, Trey Lance only played 1 game this entire season. It was a bad one for him too. He was erratic with the football, poor accuracy. He ran all over the defense at Central Arkansas or something like that. Ran all over him, Cam Newton style. But it wasn't a good passing performance from Trey Lance. I think Trey Lance got a great arm. I think he's got a great mold of clay. But he's a type of guy, sort of like a Josh Allen.
Like a Josh Allen.
You think, you hope is going to turn into that type of guy someday. But Allen is really a 10% chance that he was going to turn into the player he's turned into. The vast majority of the Josh Allens end up being busts and bust out of the league because teams are too impatient and stuff like that. But Trey Lance, I think, has the highest ceiling of any of the quarterbacks that could be interested in. The big thing about Zach Wilson is going to be how he performs in the off-field stuff, the interviews, the background checks and stuff like that. He comes from a very affluent family. I'm going to say this, and sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. But work ethic with a lot of those types of quarterbacks is something that teams really do hone in on. It reminds me a lot of things I'm hearing.
The Josh Rosen situation.
It reminds me a ton. I was just about to say that. It reminds me a ton of the Josh Rosen situation, where it's just a guy.
Does he love football?
Right? Does he need football?
Because he's smart. Because he had other interests outside of football. Because he was a well-rounded human. The knock was, well, he doesn't eat, sleep, and drink football. And as it turns out, whether that was the reason why, he was a double washout. With the first 2 teams that took a shot at him.
I think it honestly ended up being the case in a lot of ways. If you don't put Josh Allen has gotten to this point of his career and has turned his statistical career around in year 3 at least, because he is one of those guys that wakes up at 4:30 a.m. and shows up to the stadium and is always in the film room and is always in the coach's ears. And they knew that the Bills did their homework on the guy, and they knew that that's how he was like in college. They expected that type of work ethic when he came here. And that's exactly what we've seen out of Josh Allen since he's progressed with the Bills. If Zach Wilson doesn't have that sort of mentality, then I think there is a chance that talent-wise, he's probably closer to a top 8, top 10, 5 pick in this draft. Maybe he does slip to 10 or 11 if teams vet him and decide that he's not that type of worker. But if he's not that type of worker, then I don't know if you want him in New England either. Justin Fields certainly is going to be in the mix for a lot of people. He's had sort of a setback in that last game for Ohio State against Northwestern, but he looks like he's somebody that could, be a dual threat that can do a little bit of everything. He's a decent chance at having a successful NFL career. And then you sort of get into the Mac Joneses and the Kyle Trasks, and I think those guys are outside the top 10, maybe even back after the first round in some of those cases, just because of ceiling and arm talent and all those types of things that you look for in an early round QB.
Yep. Well, all right. I'm going to be the one that says it.
Yep.
This guy.
You had it ready. You had it queued up.
So you look, sometimes the answer no is all people need to hear. But in the world of, this is how things operate. Any single person becomes free. You assess whether or not you take a shot. There is something that's very intriguing about first round talent. I don't care what position. It's doubly intriguing when that person is a quarterback, considering that you're the Patriots. This is a person who was drafted 15th overall a year ago, who who some people had going as high as 6, and maybe you're not a fan at all. Some people had going as high as 6 to the Giants, who reached for Daniel Jones. That was the dangerous pick there. Haskins is by trade, and at least his pedigree coming out of college, was an accurate pocket passer who could stand up, step up in the pocket, move around, get the ball out quickly, accurate, had a big arm, lots of types of things that you would look for, and the Patriots tend to look for in quarterbacks, but everything we've seen on the field isn't remotely close to that guy. So based on the snapshot you've gotten from Dwayne Haskins, you want nothing to do with this.
No, and I think, if it comes, obviously the first thing that comes up is the work ethic stuff with what he was dealing with the Washington.
And I'm not saying I do either. I just want you to say it for the people.
Yeah. I think, but when you look at the biggest thing for me with Dwayne Haskins, more so than any of that stuff, is that he was in an absolutely perfect environment at Ohio State. Ohio State, when Dwayne Haskins was there, Terry McLaurin, who's now obviously on the Washington football team, also is a Pro Bowl level receiver, was like their wide receiver 3 on the depth chart there at Ohio State in Haskins' last year. They had him, they had Paris Campbell. Yeah. They were absolutely loaded at the skill position players, and all Haskins had to do was stand in a very clean pocket because nobody would touch him all game long because their offensive line was darn good as well, and just get the ball out and throw it to his playmakers and not screw up. And all of a sudden, he has all of this, kind of production, right? Just insane level production that last season at Ohio State. But I don't see a thrower, and I've never really seen a thrower that anticipates a whole lot of ball throws and makes a lot of doesn't make a ton of touch throws down the field either. I'm actually pulling up his 2019, my scouting report on him from the 2019 draft. And some of my things that I had first were, his front side flies open, which means that it's just a mechanical thing that leads to inaccuracies, doesn't anticipate, needs better feel for touch throws. Those are the types of things that if you're looking for the next guy in this offense, I mean, that doesn't exactly fit the bill of what the Patriots want. And I think that's the other big thing too, is Cam was a fine flyer, right? That was a fine decision at that time and everything to kind of go and make a flyer on it. But at the same time, now I think you need to really look at, what are you going to see in this offense moving forward? Is it going to be still this Brady, type of get the ball out, throw it on time, make anticipatory throws, be accurate with the football? If that's it, then you need to draft a guy that fits that bill, or even acquire a guy that fits that bill. That's definitely not Dwayne Haskins.
I'll just ask, if Dwayne Haskins had been drafted by the Patriots, would you give up on him this quickly?
If he was doing the stuff that he was doing off the field and going to strip clubs during COVID and without a mask on and all that type of stuff and not showing up for meetings, and yes, I think I would. But if he was playing the way he was playing on the field without all of that rest of that stuff, then maybe not. Maybe we're having a different discussion.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, to me, the only enticing thing is even if you take him up on waivers, you're talking about $4.75 million guaranteed, which is not a ton of money.
I wouldn't pay him that. If they're going to pick him up,
realistically, you're talking about him clearing waivers and then just taking a flyer for nothing. And if that happens, a flyer for nothing is a flyer for nothing. That's all. These are lottery tickets. These aren't. I
do agree that I would like in camp next year to see a Dwayne Haskins type quarterback on the roster in training camp, a reclamation project, right? A Dwayne Haskins, a Josh Rosen, somebody like that who has some high upside, who was maybe a former first round pick or something like that.
And not a starter. Situation damage them as much as their ability. With quarterbacks more than anything, I think situation is huge. Meaning you've seen how many quarterbacks under one regime or one system looked completely lost, that you'd given up on them, and then they get somewhere else and you're like, oh, they can play. I guess it was you just end up in the wrong place, and it can really derail your career right at the start.
Yeah.
Haskins might not be one of those guys. It's very likely he's not. But again, it's the situation matters.
Right. And I agree with that. I would, like I said, I would like to see if he's your third quarterback, if he's your fourth quarterback in camp, you give him some reps with the second team. Maybe you play him in some of the preseason games at the end of the game in the fourth quarter, see what he has. That's perfectly fine. But you're not going to invest in a guy like Dwayne Haskins to be any sort of part of the future or the answer or anything like that. You definitely need to find somebody that's better than that to hitch your wagon to in terms of the starter.
Okay, people are anxious to ask some questions. So if you guys want to ask Evan any questions before we take off here, once again, letting everybody know, Patriots post-game show, losing 38-9 to the Bills. Cam Newton was bad. Jarrett Stidham was bad. The defense was bad. Everybody was bad. Sony Michel, I'll say this, one positive thing. Sony Michel looks like a different human being since he came off IR. He really
does. Amazing what some competition will do for a player, right?
But I don't know if it's hard to say, Evan. We don't have the access we normally have to these guys. You just don't see them as much on a regular basis because of all of the COVID restrictions. Practice is limited, but he looks lighter to me. He looks quicker. He's had periods in his time where he's been a tad bulky for his frame and looked a little slow and plodding, and his jump through the line and certainly decisiveness. But even when he's running through holes, he's just hitting them quicker, and he's getting into the secondary, which is something he never did or he hasn't done since his rookie year, really.
I don't know if he's necessarily burstier than he was before, but he's definitely more decisive.
Or conviction, whatever it is.
Yeah. Right. He's definitely more decisive, and he's seeing the hole develop a little bit faster, and he's hitting it harder, and he's getting, into that what we would call in phase for any player, where you're in the rush path that you're supposed to be in. He's in that much faster and making his decisions much quicker behind the line of scrimmage. Most running backs, it depends on the play call, but most running backs have about 1 to 3 steps to make a read, especially if you're running something like outside zone or something like that. It's 1, 2, cut. Right, you can't stand there in the back of the line of scrimmage and kind of hold there and kind of do what you want to do, right? And that's definitely a difference that I think we've seen out of Sony, is that he's really on that third step. He's made a decision and he's through the line at that point.
Okay, let's Evan, let's go rapid fire here as I throw up some questions for you, because we'll try to get to a few. We did talk about Evan. You're writing about this, Evan, and we're going to do some videos on our Patriots YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to that. Just plow through here a list of keepers.
Yeah, so I think that there's 3 keepers at least on that in this rookie class, the 2020 rookie class. I think Duggar, Uche, Michael Onwenu will be a part of the next good Patriots team. I'm not going to say great because I don't know how long we're going to have until then. But the next, good Patriots team, I think those 3 guys will be on that team.
Would you say Duggar, Uche, and who?
And Michael Onwenu.
Maybe Harris.
Yeah. 2019 class I was going there is Damian Harris certainly is going to be on the team, I think, moving forward. I think Jacoby Myers is pretty much the only wide receiver that has earned a roster spot going into next season for me. I think everybody else has got to prove it to me.
Notably absent?
N'Keal Harry. Yeah. He's right in that list of prove it to me. And I would put Chase Winovich on that list as well. Winovich, when he pins his ears back and rushes the passer, is great, but that's all he can do.
I like him less and less as the season goes on. You really see how limited he is. And almost sometimes what a detriment he can be on the field because of just blowing assignments. He's just out of place. But all right, let's whip through here. We've talked about this before. Jimmy G, one of those quarterbacks. You don't know if they're going to have a home in San Francisco. You don't know what a quarterback like Jimmy is going to make in the open market, or whether or not the Patriots want him back. I'm going to answer for Evan and say no, because he's made of glass.
No, because he's made of glass, but it would not surprise me at all if Bill brings him back, because that's been Bill's succession plan all along, right? That was truly Bill's succession plan all along, and it would not shock me at all if he goes and gets Jimmy G back and brings him back and tries to make it work with Jimmy G next year. It just seems like that was sort of the one that got away from Bill Belichick, and I think he will be. I don't think he'll give up on it if he doesn't have to.
Or Jacoby.
I would probably rather. I don't know. I mean, look, I think Jacoby started a couple games in Indianapolis, was that last year, and looked fine in some of those games. Definitely the downfield ball placement was impressive. He's actually a pretty good deep ball thrower in those starts that he made. But I think either one of those guys is maybe in the same kind of level of talent, level of tier. But in terms of the fit in the Patriots offense, I've always kind of thought that Jimmy G was a little bit better in that system.
Yep. Let's see. Again, we know why. This is a complex question, but really at the root of it, I think, is a lot of people, there's a lot of people angry with Bill, the GM, versus Bill, the coach. Where I find this conversation to be really interesting and sticky is Bill Belichick is unquestionably the greatest coach in the NFL and NFL history, possibly in sports. It doesn't matter what his coaching acumen, his ability to get everybody prepared for every situation. We don't have to go over it. Okay. The problem is because of the dual job, he has to be the best at both, not just because he's providing Bill the coach. Bill, it's always Bill the GM is screwing Bill the coach, which is an overrated thing that is thrown around a lot and has been proven wrong a lot. But the issue that I find most interesting here, Evan, is that if you separated the personalities and felt if ownership felt that Bill the GM was slipping, you can't do anything about that. Regardless of how good Bill the coach is, if you did feel that one of the two jobs needed to be addressed, you have to move on from Bill Belichick entirely, and you can't do that. So you're going to accept Bill the duality. You're going to accept both Bills because there isn't one without the other. It just doesn't work. You can't say, Bill, maybe you need some personnel help, unless, of course, he has a moment of clarity and he says, you know what? I've been seeing things one way for a while. The game's changing a bit. I'm going to lean on people more than I have in the past. And it's possible he could kind of come to that conclusion on his own. But that's what would have to happen for Bill to not be the end-all be-all decision-maker GM.
I think the biggest thing with that, my biggest gripe with Bill the GM is not necessarily as deep as it is for some other people, but my biggest gripe with Bill the GM is that he's been drafting one way for so long at this point because he had Tom Brady. So right. Everybody else around, when he goes into a draft, I don't think that Bill necessarily goes into a draft and looks for that stud blue chip difference-making type of player. We're not talking about a guy that's going to come in and fill a role. We're talking about a Pro Bowl, all-pro type of talent, a transcendent type of player. I think for years, he knew that he had the quarterback, he had Brady, and all he had to do was kind of just fill the roles and fit his scheme. Draft players that fit what they want one guy to do, particularly in the entire puzzle piece. Now I think he needs to be, similar to how I always say, you see the forest through the trees with the scheming and stuff like that. He needs to see the forest through the trees and realize it's not about finding a bunch of different role players and fitting them all together underneath Brady anymore. Now they need to go out there and find 4 or 5 guys outside of Stephon Gilmore, and I guess Jake Bailey punting the football. What does this team have? Who is the blue chip player on this team? Who is the stud player on offense right now? Who is the stud player on defense right now outside of Gilmore? I guess maybe you can argue that the stud players on offense are on their offensive line, but they need skill talent and quarterbacks that are studs, not left guards. Right. And I love Joe Thuney, but he's not moving the needle in terms of the wins and losses of the team. So that's what I think is the biggest difference, is that he needs to approach it a little bit differently and see, okay, we can't just make a bunch of role players, right? We need to make start from the beginning and work on our blue chip top 5 talent, because ultimately, if you look across the board, across the NFL, and you put the 10 best players on the Patriots against the 10 best players on every other team in the league, I mean, where do the Patriots rank in that ranking? I mean, it's got to be extremely low. That's the group of players that they need to work on. I think that they have guys that can fill roles and guys that can do what the Patriots do, right, outside of the top tier talent, but they don't have a Brady. They don't have a Gronkowski. They only have one Gilmore. That's what you really need to see him change his draft strategy.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is for however many years, it's just been, I know a good football player when I see one, but
right.
it could be the game has evolved, the game has changed, the system is different. There's just a lot of factors right now where, right or wrong, that there's more misses than hits right now.
Because I think that they're really asking a lot of, they're expecting, they're drafting a guy like a Josh Uche, for example, to come in here and play like a third down sub rusher type of role. But now they need Josh Uche
they need starters.
Right. They need him to be the starting outside linebacker instead of just a third down pressure pack.
Right. Bill's the only guy drafting people for situational roles in the second and third round, including special teams, as opposed to I need impact players because I need better talent everywhere.
Right.
Speaking of drafting, I did have one here. If you had it again, Jeremy Chin or Kyle Duggar, I'll throw Winfield in there too.
Winfield is another, that's sort of, I got to be consistent with my argument, I suppose. So Winfield's the brand name, right? He's got a father who was in the NFL. He played at a Power 5 school. He was all, I always forget the conferences, all Big 12 or whatever Minnesota is in. He was the blue chip prospect, right? He was the guy that did it against great competition, and Duggar was sort of the project player. So Jeremy Chin versus Duggar, I think we're splitting hairs because both of those guys fit in the same mold of as like kind of a
hybrid,
right, from an FCS school that you were kind of looking to take a chance on that talent and that athleticism, whereas a guy like Winfield was a proven Power 5
commodity. The consensus top ranked safety there on the board too.
And that is sort of, I think, where the Patriots need to go back towards. And ultimately I would really wonder what the Patriots' last couple of drafts would look like if Bill had let Nick Caserio run the board instead of himself, because a lot of the decisions that I feel like Bill Belichick has made recently are based off of what Bill sees when he starts the draft process in January and not based off of what the scouts on the ground are saying. The scouts on the ground did not tell you to take Kyle Duggar over Antoine Winfield Jr. The scouts on the ground did not tell you to take N'Keal Harry over DK Metcalf and AJ Brown and Deebo Samuel and go back on that train, right? That's not what anybody was saying. So I wonder what the board would have looked like, what these couple of drafts would have looked like if Caserio was running things instead of Bill Belichick.
And the commenter here asks, how do you know he's not leaning on Caserio?
I know he's leaning on Caserio in terms of the homework.
Helping to build the board.
Right.
But when it comes down, and this is again, a fairly known thing in Patriots circles, it does come down a lot of times to his guy, my guy, this guy, and Bill has the final say, and it's very rare, if not ever, that he says, "All right, we'll go with that guy," and he goes off the board, he goes off the grid sometimes, even when the board dictates this is what I want, and is like, but this is my guy, so that happens. Let's see. Anything else we want to talk about here in the questions? I'm still looking around, Evan. I'll ask you here, and again, we've talked about it, and again, a lot of people saying Bill doesn't like speed. Take down my Christmas tree. What do you mean? When do people take down their Christmas tree?
Love the Christmas tree.
Don't you go? Isn't the standard you go till the new year?
Yeah, some people are different than others. Some are like, get this thing out of my house right away. No, you keep it at least till New Year's.
I like it.
Yeah.
Tight end. We did talk about a lot of people have Pitts as a guy who could get there.
They're picking 9. They have a real chance at
and Pitts, they got a shot. In terms of free agents, here's another one. You've got Henry, Jonnu Smith. Perhaps. Is there anybody out there you think Henry I've seen tied to the Patriots a bit? I don't know why. Just because he's available.
Bill loves him. Bill gushed about him, said he's watched him since high school because he watches that high school program that Hunter Henry went to. It's a whole Bill Belichick love fest. I think Hunter Henry is their typical why. He's a guy that can block, put his hand in the dirt, be that sixth offensive lineman and run routes and get open and things like that. Jonnu Smith, I love too, as sort of that Swiss Army knife, but you sort of have to use him correctly. He's not, you're just a traditional why like a Hunter Henry that's just going to, plug into that that position in your offense and go. The Titans really do a ton of different scheme stuff with Jonnu Smith to use his abilities and use his run after catch abilities in particular. Tim Patrick is a player that screams Patriots at me because he's going to be in that sort of second tier free agent wide receivers. He's a restricted free agent, so you have to sign similar situation to an Emmanuel Sanders type of thing with the Patriots all those years back, where I think that that's sort of the secondary market that they would be more comfortable at spending at that wide receiver position. And he's extremely underrated. Ex-receiver, can play on the outside. He's basically what they were hoping N'Keal Harry was going to be. He would be the N'Keal Harry, ceiling, so to speak. And I think that would be a player that they would be very interested in. I would love to see Tim Patrick in like a Brandon LaFell type of role in this offense at X.
All right, my boy, Yorgo Ikonomu. My Greek pal here. Who would you like to see the Patriots draft? Let's go with the scenarios. Worst case scenario, 15. Best case scenario, 9 or 10. At 9 or 10, dream scenario, who do you want to see available? And then if not, who are you hoping for at 15?
I think at 9 or 10, I would like to think that you're starting to flirt with Zach Wilson a little bit, and that would definitely be my top quarterback outside of Trevor Lawrence for the Patriots. I just think that he fits his accuracy. He reminds me a little bit of Baker Mayfield, and I think that that's sort of the type of quarterback that would fit in nicely here in terms of how he throws the ball down the field, how he responds to pressure, he doesn't turn the ball over a whole lot. Those are the types of things that I think that the Patriots really look for. But I do sort of like the strategy, and I've kind of been floating this one around there too, of taking the best position player available at their first pick and then finding a way to get into that, Mac Jones, Kyle Trask type of range at the end of the first round to sneak back up, whether it's trading Gilmore or a package of picks or whatever to sneak back up. So you take, a stud player at 9 or 10, maybe it's Kyle Pitts, maybe it's Marvin Wilson from Florida State, the defensive tackle, maybe it's Micah Parsons from Penn State falls, a linebacker, something like that. And then you go and get your quarterback in, the back half of the first round or early second round or something like that.
Okay. We might be wrapping it up here. I'm not going to, there's a lot of people here looking at the receiver situation. We've talked about this before, but you're looking at potentially, a class that has Golladay. It has Allen Robinson.
It's a great class.
Quite a few options. I know you like Allen Robinson the best. I'm worried based on his late season production and the Mitch Trubisky resurgence. He might be the priciest guy at this point. Of that lot, Golladay is a bit of damaged goods, and you're looking at a full rebuild in Detroit. Who do you think? Who do you think fits? Who do you think is? Again, this just isn't the Patriot way. I hate using that term, but it's just not something they do.
And I don't see them going out there and breaking that mold and spending $18 million on a receiver. And I think that a lot of people, rightfully so, have talked about guys like Stephon Diggs and DeAndre Hopkins and those types of players that have moved in the last couple of offseasons and said, hey, why didn't the Patriots get in on those guys? I truly don't think that they're going to spend that type of money at that position. So with that being said, I think you're looking at that secondary wide receiver market. Somebody like a Corey Davis might get a little bit too pricey for them, but I think that he's sort of at the top of their market. I mentioned Tim Patrick as a guy that I would like to be involved in terms of the negotiations on an RFA deal. Will Fuller, depending on the quarterback that you have, might be in the conversation. Curtis Samuel, I think if you know how to use him properly, can be effective, but that comes into a usage issue. And he's also a Z receiver, not a true X. So you're going to have to do something with Jacoby Myers at that point, and you're not getting that true boundary outside guy if you sign a guy like a Curtis Samuel. I'm not sure really if OBJ is necessarily the answer for them. But I do love him as a player and think that he would be great here. And I think that Bill knows he's great.
Yeah, if there's anything left there. I'll take this last one. And again, it was 23, not 26. But the question being, at 23, Kenneth Murray was drafted. Instead, you go Duggar and Anthony. This is exactly going back to that whole blue chipper sort of debate. Again, at 22 was Justin Jefferson, which again, he might be the best rookie receiver in the class here.
I have, for my own sanity's sake, I have to think that the Patriots were going to take Jefferson at 23 before the Vikings made that pick. Because if they weren't going to do that, then I think a lot of hope is lost with them evaluating that position. Because just from a stylistic standpoint, the college tape, the college production, I mean, he checked every single box.
Plays inside, outside.
Just a dynamic separator. I mean, just an awesome route runner. So if they were going to take him at 23, and you remember that the draft call where they made the trade back in the draft, you did hear Bill say, "Oh, okay, they took Justin Jefferson at 22," and Bill said to Nick Caserio, "Okay, make the call to make the trade out of 23." So I wanted to hope that Justin Jefferson was going to be. I'm not losing any sleep about losing Kenneth Murray, though. I think he's a decent player, but I thought he was kind of a overrated prospect, sort of tools-based prospect that they were hoping was going to splash in the NFL. I don't think that he's any more of an impact player than Kyle Duggar is.
So the path to the top 10 pick, lose to the Jets, Broncos, Cowboys, Chargers, and Vikings all win.
Yeah, so I think that they can get in there, and I think if they do get in there, like I said, it's premium position, premium player. Give me somebody that everybody can say, "Oh, yeah, that pick makes sense by the Patriots here. That's a good pick."
Vikings, Lions, winnable.
Yep.
Cowboys, Giants, absolutely winnable. You're looking at Chargers, Chiefs. If the Chiefs rest everybody, they've got nothing to play for.
I also want to mention, I see a lot of people saying, why would a wide receiver come here with the way that, the Patriots are set up? Money talks, people. Money talks a loud game. And if the Patriots are going out there and they're offering Davis or Tim Patrick or Curtis Samuel or Chris Godwin or whoever it ends up being, they offer him a big bag of money, then I don't think a lot of people care a whole lot about the rest of the situation in a lot of circumstances. And I'm sure that they are a little bit more confident that Bill Belichick than some of the fans here, that Bill will be able to move up and get some quarterback help and stuff like that.
For Julian's sake, because he's a loyalist here, I will repeat that. The way to get into that top 10, I believe, is lose to the Jets, Broncos, Cowboys, Chargers, Vikings all win. A lot of winnable games on that slate. So if you look at it again, the Patriots could climb. That might get them inside. That might get them to 9, I think, or 10. Regardless, that puts you in the quarterback conversation. And that then things start to get really interesting there. So we'll see what happens. And again, it's always interesting is you have quarterbacks that slide and you think they're going to go, or you have drafts where the mock drafts have the fourth quarterback going at 15, 16, 17, and then everybody freaks out and they go 4 of the first 8 picks. So you just never know. If you're there, you don't know if your guy is there, and you don't know if the guy that they want is going to be there when it's their turn to pick. So
the good news is that it's so much easier to trade up from like 11 to 8 if you have to, right?
Right, because people like the player at 11 about as much as 8. If you're looking at the first 15, 16 players, they're all studs. The things start to get a little mixed in the same once you get into the 20s.
Right. So it's much easier to make that trade up. The Bills traded up twice. They traded up from 21 to 12 to 7 to take Josh Allen. But when they traded from 12 to 7, all they gave up was 2 future second-round picks. We're not talking about an RG3 type of package where they gave up 6 picks to move up those couple of spots, right? It was just a couple of picks to move up.
Yeah. All right. We're going to wrap it. Evan's got to get a writing, and we'll have a ton of stuff hitting our YouTube channel coming up in a little bit. You can always check that out. Patriots Press Pass. Some of you have already subscribed. If you haven't, please do so. You'll get notified every time we go live for situations like this. And we'll have a bunch of videos coming out after the game. Again, tomorrow, Evan will take a look at the film, and we'll you know what it's going to show, but we're going to do it anyway because that's what he gets paid to do. And that's basically it. So again, thanks for watching. Pats go down 6-9, a really gross 38-9 loss. Thank you everybody for hanging out late on a school night with us. We will see you guys next.